Thanks for joining us today for our webinar on the future of retail. Today, I have Sarah Crockett with me. She is the Chief Marketing Officer at backcountry.com and serves on the board of Stance Socks. Thanks for joining us today, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
Before we get started, I have the ever fun disclosures. Everything that we discuss today is for educational purposes only. It should not be taken as professional advice. If you have specific questions, if you are interested in investing in any of the ideas that we talk about, please speak with your financial professional. So before we get started, I think there's a little bit of background where ever since COVID or even pre-COVID, there have been a lot of changes in retail and marketing, which is why I thought the future of retail would be a very interesting topic. I know that both Sarah and I look pretty young, but Sarah, how long have you been in the industry? What is your background?
Goodness. I'll do the math on that one in just a second. But yeah, I've had the pleasure of having a great career in the outdoor and action sports and overall lifestyle industry. Have had time in different retailers and different brands, including Vans, REI, Lucky Brand, Burton Snowboards most recently, and now as of June, started my new role as the CMO of backcountry.com and our portfolio of brands. So I think, let's see, the math on that's close to 20 years.
Wow, that is a long time. That's a lot of background in retail. I know that retail had already been changing before COVID. Where brick and mortar maybe wasn't as popular or was losing steam. But especially since COVID-19, have you seen any shifts or have they been quicker? What have you been seeing?
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely been some dramatic changes. To your point, like every industry, retail was seeing some waves of change and trends prior to COVID-19. I call COVID-19 an accelerant of a lot of those trends. So what you're seeing happen is a dramatic acceleration into e-commerce. And that is no surprise, given how everybody has been sort of stuck at home. Right. I do believe that the role of brick and mortar is still an important one and will be one in the future in bringing brands to life. However, the momentum towards meeting your customer online and servicing their needs in more of a virtual sense is very clearly taken over. And I don't see that backing down after we're past this.
Right. I know that during the beginning of the pandemic, you were still at Burton, and then in the summer, you made a shift to backcountry.com. Backcountry.com has always been an online retailer versus Burton. So in terms of infrastructure and how the businesses are run, what differences did you see?
Yeah, dramatic differences. The sporting goods and action sports and outdoor space in general has been a bit slowed to the digital trends. And that is largely because of the traditional wholesale nature of many of these brands and businesses. And that even includes the giants like a Nike and Adidas. Right. Those brands were built on the backs of working with third-party wholesalers like an REI, like a backcountry.com, and that carried the weight of their business. And so Burton certainly saw that challenge at the beginning of COVID, where it did have a great digital platform. It made up a very small percentage of the total business. Coming to backcountry.com, it's an online only and has always been an online only business. In the outdoor category, those are two components that have fueled putting backcountry in a very positive spot during this transition. And when I say transition, I mean these trends that we're talking about. Because the outdoor industry, and you can read it in a lot of different papers. I even saw a headline that said the outdoors was the new toilet paper. Is certainly
is.
Yeah, it really is. It's certainly at the center of customer demand. People are trying to figure out ways to recreate and spend time safely out of their homes. So being an e-com only position certainly lessen the risk that you see happening across other retail segments where people are shuttering their doors. And brick and mortar is very challenged in this unpredictable time. And people just generally aren't coming out, even in places where you can have an open brick and mortar experience. People aren't interested in exposing themselves to the same degree that we saw prior to this pandemic. So very different situations for both Burton and for backcountry.com.
Do you feel like Backcountry had the platform to accelerate their sales, but maybe there have been hiccups in terms of delivery? And, to your point, I think everybody's been looking for a bicycle. Doesn't matter what kind of bike, but they've been back ordered. Nobody can find one. You could resell your old bike for hundreds of dollars, whereas before this, it would just sit in your garage.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. So COVID has had an impact in a lot of different ways on the retail industry. Another way that we haven't talked about yet is inventory, and that comes down to manufacturing. So in March, when this really started to reach its first peak, a lot of the companies who were producing products hit the brakes and reduce their products that were being manufactured. In addition, we saw a lot of the manufacturing happening in China. And of course, that naturally hit the brakes as well with everything that China was going through at the beginning of COVID. So these delays in production of raw materials, manufacturing, and cutbacks in orders put a lot of pressure on a lot of our product categories. So that leads to an inventory scarcity situation in addition to peak demand. So what do you get there is you get overpriced used bikes.
Right, exactly. Since we're talking about trends and since it somehow is already October, I know the holidays are around the corner. So what are some trends that you are seeing or predicting for the holidays?
Okay, I'm going to give you guys all some good pro tips right now.
We need pro tips.
Shop early. And the reason why I say shop early is what I just mentioned as far as inventory scarcity. That is going to be a theme. In addition to inventory scarcity, what we're going to see is unprecedented fulfillment demands. So shipping with these booms in e-commerce, if you're buying something online, it has to be shipped. And so that is putting some pressure on the fulfillment side of our business. And that's working with partners like UPS and FedEx and DHL. They have capacity. And so with increased demand and some challenges in staffing regulations due to properly socially distancing in these types of facilities, it's just a conundrum of factors that is leading to what will likely be somewhat of a frustrating customer experience, not being able to get what you want when you want it. It's going to be an earlier shopping season than we've ever seen before, officially launching, as I say, with Prime Day coming up here next week on October 13th. I think that is the unofficial launch of holiday gift giving.
Are you finding that the delivery partners have been inundated? Have they been able to be flexible with the demand? Are they just constrained?
I think like every business in this situation, that's a industry that's having to do things in new ways, accept new challenges and figure out how to manage through them. I don't want to speculate on what their broad stroke strategies are, but I think it's probably some combination of everything you just said, constraints, working within that, definitely inundated based on the demand that we're seeing. So I think it's going to be a challenging, but fruitful for them part of the year.
Do you feel like there are any delivery partners that have excelled above the rest?
I think it's producing some diversity in the space, actually, because if your demands can't be met by your typical longstanding partners, you have to go look at different logistics options. So I could foresee this being a moment that diversifies the space with some additional players that maybe wouldn't have typically been used. Yeah. I'm even hearing of operations like TaskRabbit, Uber, Lyft being tapped for unique ways of servicing customers' needs. So if you can get those organizations as partners for the last mile, it may help fulfill the demand in new creative
Right.
ways.
Because that is the most critical part of the delivery, right? The last
Exactly.
mile to get the
Exactly.
goods to you.
Yes.
In terms of other trends, and especially related to backcountry.com or especially outdoor activities, we as investors get a lot of questions about ESG investments. So, environmentally sustainable investments. I think a lot of people have taken action where they want their money to speak for them and for their beliefs and where they want their money invested. So to that point, being an outdoors company, how much emphasis or have you been making any changes towards more sustainability, more
Yeah.
environmental preservation?
My belief in this space is that this is simply not even just for the outdoor industry. As a industry, we have a footprint that we need to minimize. And that is the case no matter what type of business you operate within. I think we have some really good long-standing things that we can point to, like our long-standing partnership with the Nature Conservancy, as ways of trying to make an impact in reducing our footprint or making up for our footprint. I think we can do a lot more, especially as we're entering in the manufacturing side of things. So we have our own product lines now, and that's a relatively new strategy for backcountry. As we go into producing things, making sure that we're producing those things with a sustainable approach is absolutely something that we take into account as we're building our lines. So a collective sustainability and climate strategy is something, me being new in my role, I aspire to lead on behalf of backcountry.com. One of our brands that we have in our portfolio is an outdoor online only retailer in Germany, Bergfreunde, and they have already made longstanding commitments to be climate neutral, and that's something that I can absolutely take and model and aspire to do.
Do you feel like there is more desire from people to purchase things that have been produced in a sustainable way?
Yes, definitely. And we see this in our data. It's not just anecdotes, customer research, purchase behaviors. It's definitely an elevated criteria for our customers to align their dollars with their values. And climate, specifically in our industry, at least with our customer targets, is the number one issue. And sustainability and climate aren't the same exact topics, but one certainly helps the other. So we do see that becoming much more of a tangible factor that people are guiding their purchase decisions based off of. It used to, in its earlier days, I can kind of go back to 10 years ago. It was something that was on our radar as well. But what we would see is people would rate it as an interest point, but we would see their dollars misalign with that. And you also
they'd still go for the cheaper product.
Exactly.
But they want sustainability.
Exactly.
Somewhere.
And you see that with Made in America as well. You would see that at that time. Fast forward to present day, that trend has somewhat been bucked.
Got it. While we're on the topic of ESG, there's also been a big push for diversity, I think, just generally speaking. My statistics are a little bit old. They're from 2019, but half of the population is women, and 70 to 80% of women drive consumer purchases. Women ages 15 to 35 shop online about an hour a day, and yet only 25% of C-level executives are women. Is there a big disconnect there? How has your experience been being one of the small minority being in a C-suite, and specifically in retail? How does that reflect who's leading the company versus who is really shopping?
Yeah, I think the topic of diversity, equity, and inclusion is a really important one. In general, I would say it's broader even than gender, of course, as we know it. But the way that I look at this is you're underserving your potential as an organization if you don't embrace it, and not just embrace it, but really crave it. Having diverse backgrounds at the table really helps you take your B game to an A game.
Right.
And that could be the case at every level in an organization. So I would really put the charge out to businesses and other organizations to take the time to create diverse talent pools, because they certainly exist. A lot of time, the talent pools that you'll attract can be based on regionality, can be based on individual networks. And sometimes those two factors as examples alone can severely limit your diverse pool. And if you don't have a diverse pool to look from, who you ultimately select is then challenged. It's not to say that these incredible, talented individuals aren't out there. They're out there, but you should take it upon yourself to go out and seek them and find them.
Absolutely.
And as far as my personal experience in the leadership division of an organization, I think the outdoor industry and action sports industry are pretty high on the list of organizations and industries that lack diversity when it comes to gender and leadership. And so it has been something that I personally wear as responsibility and accountability to represent the potential and embrace again and crave bringing in more diverse backgrounds, whether it's gender, ethnicity, different industries. I think that's something that I, as somebody in this seat, fully hold the accountability to help spread the word and make those changes.
Do you feel like, especially being in the outdoor industry, where it, if I looked at all the action sports out there, who am I seeing? It's typically white males. So you being a woman, do you feel like you stick out? Do you feel like there's some sort of barrier to being accepted?
I think at first glance that might be the case. However, I would say that my experience in these industries and at the brands that I've been with, what that has taught me is that as long as you're genuine to who you are and what your background is, and you represent that in your seat and in your role every day, people have been incredibly welcoming, have been embracing of the different background that I brought into the space. And they haven't shooed me away yet. And so I actually think that maybe on the surface level, it would appear as something different, and anything different, you're going to squint at a little bit. But it's been a very welcoming experience. The advice I always give people who are going into new industries is don't feel the need to fake it. Don't feel the need to pretend like you surf 100 days a year if you've never been on a surfboard once.
Right.
Just be honest and open, and really showcase the strengths that brought you into that role in the first place.
And how do you feel diversity and inclusion can be better honed to market to, say, women or, other people who may not be reflected in a lot of marketing campaigns?
Yeah, I mean, your stats aren't wrong, right? So even if they're not, I don't know the numbers off the top of my head either, they're very accurate directionally. And as a brand who's working to reach more customers more frequently and be very relevant to them, let's acknowledge that we have the most diverse generation in existence. And that's going to continue to be the case. And so if we as an industry don't reflect that in the decisions that we're making, as far as the places that we show up, the products that we sell, the faces that we use, the different levels of progression that we expose, then we're completely missing the boat. And talk about relevance being the key. You're not going to be relevant if you're not able to connect those dots and really connect with this incredibly beautifully diverse generation that's in front of us.
Right. Circling back to the pandemic, do you feel like trying to push for diversity and trying to push for inclusion, and especially being a working mom, have been impacted by the pandemic? Or do you think that has created more opportunity to have diversity?
Well, look, let's not forget what's been going on during the pandemic. We've had these incredible spikes of racial injustice and Black Lives Matter movements that have accelerated as well during this time. I think 2020, we all know, is a year of unpredictable, year of high tension. And so these are all factors that are happening around us. And as a brand, again, my job is to be super relevant to my consumers' needs. And so I need to acknowledge what's happening around us. And all of these factors are happening around us. So we have to address them. We have to have a position because it's something that our customers are asking us about. And when it comes to diversity, equity, and inclusion, specifically, that's something that we are absolutely focused on making some serious improvements in. It's a marathon, it's not a sprint. And our first steps are looking internally and making sure that our house is in order, while also taking advantage of the fact that there are some amazing people and amazing organizations in the outdoor industry that have been committed to diversifying the outdoors for far longer than just this past year. And we as a brand can help further and scale their missions because they're like-minded to what we aspire to see happen as well. So instead of building something new and on our own and branding it, that's not interesting to me. That's not the point. We want to make impact. So making impact by changing our actions internally and making some improvements and listening and educating, and also connecting with more of these individuals and organizations that are already progressing diversity in the outdoors and helping to further scale them.
Right. I think, kind of in summary, the trends that we have been seeing over the past couple of months, do you think that these are trends that will continue? Do you think that will eventually be to a place where brick and mortar stores are really just maybe to showcase products? I mean, where do you really see retail going in the next, we'll say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I think some of the trends, I think a lot of the trends are with us for the long haul. I do think things like brick and mortar are good examples of areas that will come back after the pandemic. I don't think anything's going to be exactly as it was once before. So to your example, are they going to become more showrooming? And there's more endless aisle type of behavior, which is connected digitally in these stores. I think that's probably going to start to manifest more and more and more in the future. But once people have experienced the convenience of something like online shopping, that's something that's going to be pretty hard to walk back as far as a trend. So I think that those are things that are going to continue. I think that people are going to appreciate having experiences and connections with people in the future when it's safe to do so, maybe more than they have in the past. So I do think in-person experiences will return. People will value them. But then there's some of these things that are wrapped up more in convenience that will stay for the long haul.
Do you think people are spending more, spending less, spending the same?
Well, certainly I can tell you from the outdoor industry perspective, the spending habits have shifted in our direction to a certain degree. You see that across the board, as I mentioned, with the toilet paper reference. So I do think people are spending more in new categories. And I think we see that reported in some of the groceries and alcohol and outdoors.
Yes, I've started adding alcohol as its own line item in the budget.
Yeah, there you go. Exactly. So you see these spending patterns shifting, and I don't think it's all incremental. I think people are shifting dollars. I think people are wearing more casual bottoms than they ever have before. So maybe they're not spending as much time in the fashion industry as they used to, and maybe that's transitioned to more athleisure, as an example.
Right. Totally makes sense.
Yes.
I feel like you gave us a very good scope of what's happening in retail, where the future of retail is going, even if it's not fully online. You know, we definitely have been pushed in that direction.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah.
Thank you.
I appreciate all of your knowledge, and have a good day.
Yeah, happy to be here. Have a great day.